O God, our Heavenly Father, we come before you this day, asking your blessings upon Her Gracious Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, her servants, the Governor General, His Excellency Sir Tapley Seaton, the Ministers of Government and their staff who govern the affairs of our Twin Island Federation, and the members and friends of the St. Kitts National Youth Parliament Association. Give to each member of this association a strong and abiding sense of the great responsibilities laid upon us as we aim to be an enabling agent for the open and honest discussion of national issues by youth to ensure equality and justice in nation building. Guide us here in our deliberations. Give us a deep and thorough understanding of the youths that we serve. Help us to use power wisely and well. Inspire us to make decisions which establish and maintain our association, and by extension, our federation, on the principles of prosperity and righteousness, where freedom prevails and justice rules. In your name and glory, amen.
Messages.
I'd first like to take the opportunity to welcome everyone to this sitting of the St. Kitts National Youth Parliament Association, the second sitting for the SKNYPA year 2020-2021. Today, we will be debating issues of national importance, which include a sexual harassment bill and a national cultural policy. We hope to lend our voices to the important conversations that need to be had, and in some way expedite these discussions to ensure that these matters are placed on the list of national importance for passage later on. I want to congratulate and thank all of the youth parliamentarians who are debating with us today. We want to thank the Ministry of Youth Empowerment, the Ministry of Community Development and Gender Affairs for their assistance this morning as we have this sitting. We'll now have a message by the Honorable Minister of Youth, Honorable General Powell.
May it please you, Madam Speaker, with your leave, I rise to say a few words on the occasion of the sitting of the National Youth Parliament. I rise in my capacity as the Minister with responsibility for youth development, culture, and sport, but more specifically in relation to the Department of Youth Empowerment, who this month, November, is celebrating Youth Month under the theme Celebrating Youth Creativity, Innovation, and Resilience. I acknowledge the sitting of the Youth Parliament this morning as a part of that month of activities and commend the participation of SKNYPA in what is a very important month for youth, and as one of our more active youth organizations, and certainly one that I think the others can certainly look to in terms of your stellar performance over so many years. Madam Speaker, please allow me also to use this opportunity to thank SKNYPA for recently conveying on me honorary membership. I must admit that my own time in the National Youth Parliament was quite short many, many years ago, and so I give my full support towards SKNYPA, and hopefully I can make up for some of that lost time. I would very briefly touch on the two bills, or the two items on the agenda for today. First, the sexual harassment bill. Some may deem this to be a heavy topic for young people, but I think that our young people within SKNYPA are more than prepared to debate something that can be considered controversial, but at the same time something that is very important, a topic that needs to be addressed, and something that I think is obviously quite prevalent in our own society here in St. Kitts and Nevis, hence why it has made its way onto the agenda. Sexual harassment is something that some may very well consider to be guided by certain grey lines, and will try and use our West Indian culture and habits and behavior to make those lines even more blurred. But it is something serious. It is something that we tend to find particularly at the workplace, and I commend SKNYPA on taking the bold initiative to address such an issue head on. As it relates to the cultural policy, again, this is something which touches me, especially as it falls within the Department of Culture, or to the Department of Culture, for which I have responsibility. This is something that has been working on for some time now, in terms of updating what we have. As the Ministerial responsibility for Carnival, we tend to again blur some lines there. And while our Carnival really falls within the ambit of culture, we over the last few years have seen Carnival as we know it to become more commercialized and less focused on the cultural aspects of St. Kitts and Nevis, the folklore and the traditions. And so I think it is particularly in light of that, because we tend to only look at culture in terms of Carnival, I commend the National Youth Parliament in terms of addressing this particular policy and appreciating the need for this policy. Certainly this year, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have had perfect reason to reflect on our Carnival in particular, and to show great appreciation for the cultural aspects of it, the folklore, the masquerades, the bull, the actors. But at the same time, culture is a lot more than just Carnival. We have our tangible and intangible cultural heritage. Things that we take for granted, some things that are happening that perhaps many members of this very parliament may not be aware of, because of how we have moved away from some of those traditions. Simple things such as broom making. A lot of us probably have never used those old long-time brooms. I've had cars to use those with the extra long handles to wipe the cobwebs out of the steep roofs, because we don't build like that anymore. I do have some memories of that, although I'm not that old. But the importance of maintaining and documenting our cultural heritage, identifying the persons responsible for keeping some of these traditions alive, and coming up with ways in which we can maintain them, preserve them, pass on that information from generation to generation. I think that is certainly one of the things that we need to really codify, and here we have that work being done. And so, Madam Speaker, with those very few words, I thank you and your colleagues for your listening ears. Thank you for having me here, and I look forward to a very healthy debate here in the Parliament today. May it please you.
Announcements by the Speaker.
I'd like to thank all of the individuals who are joining us, whether physically or virtually. We are gracious with the support with the St. Kitts National Youth Parliament Association and all of our colleagues and affiliates for our National Youth Parliament sitting today. I would also like to recognize the presence of His Excellency Vance Emery and all of the other government officials who are joining us this morning.
Questions. Motions.
Madam Speaker, I rise with your leave to have adopted in this session of Parliament a resolution by the National Assembly of St. Christopher and Nevis to adopt the National Cultural Policy. Noting that the development of the cultural sector requires an informed, systematic, and forward-looking policy framework to harness the capabilities and resources to ensure long-term sustainability. And bearing in mind that St. Kitts and Nevis, like most other Caribbean economies, has a narrow and declining industrial and services sector base and an expanding debt overhang in part due to deteriorating export competitiveness, and that the creative industry can be an engine for economic growth and a mechanism for economic diversification, which could improve global competitiveness, boost entrepreneurship, and youth employment. Acknowledging the creative industry is a major growth pole in the digital economy as exemplified by the shift towards a post-industrial economy where personal, recreational, and audiovisual service has expanded as a share of the expenses of the average household and as a share of the economy. And realizing further that the growth of the digital creative sector is accounted by rapid techno-economic change in products, distribution, and marketing, the increasing commercialization of intellectual property in the digital world, the growth of social networking, and for the synergies forged by value-enhancing activities and the conversion of contents, media, and telecoms. Having understood these, may this National Assembly create a framework that A, effectively allows for eased access of funds by entrepreneurs wishing to enter or expand their reach within the orange economy. B, promotes the importance of intellectual property and provides further protection for those who hold copyrights. C, creates avenues for the expression of culture and integrates into the education system the importance of the protection and practice of our culture, language, and heritage. D, makes provisions for the linkages between the cultural sector and those of tourism, trade, and technology. E, makes further provisions for the linkage of culture and international relations. F, implements a structure for the administration and financing of culture within the Federation, while further allowing for periodic reviews, adjustments, and improvements as it is rolled out. Be it therefore resolved that the National Assembly of St. Christopher and Nevis hereby adopt the National Cultural Policy.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second the motion before this Honorable House and reserve my right to speak.
Madam Speaker, I rise once again to have a discussion on this resolution. My government is proposing to this Honorable House a policy that will bring the Federation closer toward the realization of a cultural renaissance. My government understands the reality within which all citizens have historically lived and the need to establish and implement a set of coherent principles, objectives, and means to foster, protect, and promote the cultural expression of our people. The National Cultural Policy for St. Kitts and Nevis creates unique opportunities for all people to be liberated in their own cultural expressions. Cultural expressions that has only begun to resurface in the 21st century following the periods of oppression and the subsequent goal of establishing ourselves as a sovereign nation. Periods such as colonialism and slavery have morphed the mindset and self-esteem of our people to believe that our culture is inferior. Yet, amidst all this, throughout our short history, we have registered great resilience and stayed true to ourselves. Madam Speaker, I turn your attention to the 1935 Buckley's Riot, an embodiment of Kittitian resilience. Madam Speaker, my government has created a policy that reflects our country's continuous struggle to be confident in our cultural expressions and the cultural diversity of our society. Simultaneously, it is a policy that reflects the cultural excellence and international achievement that our people have established over the years in culture and the arts, sports, academia, commerce, et al. Lest we forget the role of prominent Kittitians and Nivijans such as Sir Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw, Kim Collins, Joel Armatrading, Cicely Tyson, King Elimat, Collins Maynard, among many others. Madam Speaker, you may ask why now the government has decided to propose this policy. The members opposite, the previous administration, made several failed attempts to develop a national cultural policy, the last time being in 2011 with, as according to the Department of Culture's website, consultations with visual, performing and culinary artists, service providers and heritage institutions. Madam Speaker, clearly you can see that the previous administration dragged their feet on this matter. In the absence of a policy, they have created a program of arts and cultural development through the establishment of the Department of Culture in 1995. This department continues to carry important work in the implementation of programs that have ranged from arts, arts education, to the staging of festivals, to the implementation of workshops and development activities in schools and communities across the country. There has even been active participation in regional cultural affairs such as Carifesta VII and Carifesta XIV. However, when we came into office, we saw the amazing work that the department does in promoting our culture, but we felt that it was not enough. We realized that there needed to be a framework that protects, supports, and encourages cultural expressions. That is why we immediately engaged with the current administration at the department, which led us to engaging with Dr. Keith Nurse, a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Caveville campus. Afterwards, we embarked on widespread consultations in both St. Kitts and Nevis, far more than the sloppy job done by the previous administration, because we are a government that understands culture encompasses all of us. These consultations span the wide cross-section of the St. Kitts and Nevis community, including, but not limited to, artists, cultural officials, private sector representatives, youth entrepreneurs, religious and other secular groups, police, customs, and even collaborations with my fellow ministers of finance, foreign trade, tourism, and education. Although, Madam Speaker, I must admit, it was a very tedious and time-consuming task, but I am confident to say that as the Minister of Culture, my government has created a forward-thinking policy. Madam Speaker, before I return to my seat, my fellow ministers and I will speak on the framework that my government wishes to establish. Madam Speaker, my ministry is proposing that my government make further provisions for the linkage of culture and international relations, and an implementation of a structure for the administration and financing of culture within the Federation, while further allowing for periodic reviews, adjustments, and improvements as it is rolled out. More than ever, the government has been looking to diversify its economy and recalibrate its trading relationships with emerging nations like India, as referenced in the 2020 Forum speech. Culture plays a vital role as it is the gap to bridging two different, unique cultures. In fact, Marta Reinska, PhD of the University of Wrocław, says that art and culture are in the forefront of many countries' promotional efforts. These countries recognize that showing their cultural heritage provides them with an opportunity of showing who they are, creating a positive image, thus helping to achieve their political aims, end quote. Contrary to local popular belief, St. Kitts and Nevis and this culture is well known in the international community. Madam Speaker, let us take a walk down memory lane to 2014 when history was made, as ISKN reports that Collegian Band joined the Small Axe Band in 2008 and the legendary Elimat and the GI Brass Band in 1985 as the only local acts to perform at Belgium's Antonelli's Festine, dubbed the largest Caribbean festival in the world. Today, the Federation enjoys an amicable relationship with the Belgian people. Madam Speaker, I reference the St. Kitts and Nevis Observer article entitled St. Kitts and Nevis Consulate in Belgium sends its compliments, end quote. Another example is the Caribbean having strong roots in Canada, which has led to the ongoing discussion of the CARICOM-Canada Agreement. UNESCO, which has always been an international flagship of culture, was the organizer of the 2005 Cultural Diversity Convention, which was negotiated as a counterforce for the pronouncements of the World Trade Organization. As a result, there will be greater collaboration in negotiations and vetting of countries with the Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade and Culture. In the promotion of the cultural services of St. Kitts and Nevis in the global marketplace to leverage international cooperation and cultural diplomacy. This will give the Ministry of Culture more teeth to negotiate through bilateral agreements, support for staging, and improvement of national festivals through collaborations, training, and special funding agreements. Furthermore, the policy calls for engagement of the National Commission on UNESCO to ensure that it has the resources from UNESCO for the cultural development of St. Kitts and Nevis. From this, the Ministry of Culture will be provided more resources to participate actively and regularly in regional and international conferences, meetings, workshops, etc. Clearly, our policy is streamlining our cultural expressions to ensure that we are providing modern cultural products. Through using our culture as a diplomatic tool, it aids us in our pursuits of economic diversification and improving our export competitiveness. In addition, one of the main ideas of this policy is to strengthen the present cultural administration and positive cultural identity among citizens in order to enhance the cultural industries of St. Kitts and Nevis for national, economic, and social development. Cultural agencies like the Department of Culture need to be strong, vibrant, and dynamic. These organizations such departments need to be equipped for the successful implementation of the goals and objectives of this policy. It takes an all-hands-on approach in order for these organizations to lead the Federation to true national cultural development and a developed economy. Before this policy is implemented, the government will evaluate the structure and operations of the St. Kitts Department of Culture regarding its efficiency and effectiveness and its capacity to oversee the policy before you. From this evaluation, we will begin procedure to start a St. Kitts Cultural Foundation, where we expect to study the existing cultural foundations in Nevis, Barbados, and St. Lucia, with the expectation that there will be regular consultations with the one in Nevis. Next, we expect to provide revenue for the proper configuration, staffing, and resourcing of the St. Kitts and Nevis National Cultural Foundations in order for them to be able to oversee the implementation of the positions of the policy. We wish to provide increased revenue to the National Cultural Foundations of St. Kitts and Nevis for the extension of the work they must carry out in the implementations of the positions in this policy. For example, they will need to bid for more actions and activities in the following areas: trade policy and operations, culture and heritage tourism promotion, creation and management of a national registry of arts and youth entrepreneurs, development of a national center of arts in the St. Kitts, and management of the centers in St. Kitts and Nevis, creation and management of a national event strategy, promotion of cultural diplomacy, and greater involvement in negotiation of bilateral agreements and international cooperation. All this in addition to the work they currently carry out. Additionally, we wish to provide revenue and administrative direction for the staging of the various festivals, including the constitution of the Carnival Committee, Music Festival Secretariat, and other committees for the engagement of the wider public, the negotiation of sponsorship and other avenues for private sector involvement, and enhancement of the revenue streams and revenue generation from the festivals. This will be executed with a framework of greater involvement by the Ministry of Culture in the administration of all these committees, given the direction to the Ministry of Culture for the coordination of actions of the various ministries and agencies listed as playing a significant roles in the implementation of the policy positions in light of the cross-cutting nature of culture within public administration. Before I leave, I want to talk about the implementation and review process. This is to ensure that there is regular monitoring and evaluation of the achievement of the goals and objectives outlined in the policy. In this regard, the Ministry of Culture, through the St. Kitts Department of Culture and the Nevis Cultural Foundation, must be established as the focal point of policy monitoring and evaluation. The Ministry of Culture must therefore create mechanisms for the regular monitoring of the implementation process. There will be a policy advisory committee which is set up for the formulation of the policy, which should be mandated to lead this process of monitoring and evaluation. The advisory committee must therefore be comprised by private and public sector officials with the ministry as the secretariat. There must be regular reporting on the implementation process. Additionally, we wish to give direction to the Ministry of Culture to create an action plan with relative timelines, budget, and responsible agencies for the timely implementation of the positions outlined in the policy. We wish to give direction to the Ministry of Culture to establish and manage the relevant intersectoral linkages relevant to the implementation of the policy. In addition to that, the policy outlines that there be a mandate that the Ministry of Culture there be a mandate of the Ministry of Culture to establish a cultural policy implementation advisory and oversight committee for the periodic monitoring and evaluation of the process of policy implementation. And finally, the policy would provide for a major review and amendment of the document within a period to be determined, having in regard the evolutionary and dynamic nature of the policy as it is a work in progress. Clearly, culture is all of us, and we, as a people, we have to come together because we have to come together as a people. Culture is all around us, right? It is all around us, and we have to come together as a people because we cannot have it as, okay, Tom is over there and Susie is over there. We all have to come together and we all have to contribute to culture. And there's no standalone in culture. So we are implementing this policy because we feel that, yes, culture is all around us, and the Department of Culture and the Carnival Secretariat, they're doing a good job. But we want a policy that governs how culture is run. We want to be able to streamline culture so that it can be marketable to the international market. So with that being said, I wish this resolution safe passage for this honorable house. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister, Honorable Jalen Manzak, Minister responsible for entertainment, entrepreneurship, talent development, and culture.
Madam Speaker, allow me to lend my support to the resolution to adopt the National Cultural Policy for St. Kitts and Nevis with a brief contribution before this Honorable House. Madam Speaker, it was author Walter Lippmann who once said that culture is a name for what people are interested in, their thoughts, their models, the books they read, and the speeches they hear, end quote. Just by this quote alone, I'm sure it is not too hard to imagine the weight of the topic being debated this morning. Madam Speaker, in debating the resolution brought before us, I would first like to draw attention, especially to the first point made. Here, it does not sugarcoat the context of our current situation here in the Federation. I quote, St. Kitts and Nevis, like most other Caribbean economies, has a narrow and declining industrial and service sector-based and an expanding debt overhang, in part due to deteriorating export competitiveness, end quote. Madam Speaker, if I were to stand here this morning and paint you a picture of our not-so-distant past, it may seem far too similar to the economic situation facing Kittitians and Nevisians today. At the turn of the 21st century, the economy of a small, former British colony found itself in a financial crisis. Sugar production, the foundation of its economy, was no longer profitable nor competitive in the global market. The citizens of our great country had no choice but to diversify into a completely foreign industry in order to survive. Every year, our vibrant culture attracts millions of tourists to our shores. They come to the Federation to eat our local cuisine, listen to our music, enjoy our natural surroundings, experience our language and customs, and celebrate our cultural festivals. This year, however, such was not the case. In an unprecedented pandemic, planes have been grounded, cruise ships docked, and our islands free of the tourists whose dollars drive our economy. According to the International Monetary Fund, tourism alone makes up 50 to 90% of the GDP and employment of small Caribbean countries. Financial experts have reported that these tourism-dependent countries will see an average contraction in GDP of up to 10.3%. Now, Madam Speaker, allow us to present to you and this Honorable House a solution, the one outlined in this very same resolution debated today. Creative industries are one of the most rapidly growing sectors globally. Creative industries, also known as cultural industries, refers to a range of economic activities which are concerned with the generation or exploitation of knowledge and information. It is also referred to as the creative economy, orange industries, or orange economy here in the Caribbean and Latin America. The orange economy, or creative economy, includes all sectors based on the creation of intellectual property. UNESCO states that its purpose is the production or reproduction promotion, dissemination, and/or the marketing of goods, services, and activities that have cultural, artistic, or patrimonial content. This will include design and visual arts, tourism and cultural heritage, new media and software, performing arts, music, literary arts, and publications. These sectors show immense promise as rapidly growing industries in the region. Now, Madam Speaker, the Federation has an untapped wealth of human resource that may even surpass that of the natural resources that surrounds us. Our borders brim with entrepreneurs and creators, artists and performers. However, Madam Speaker, their creativity is often lost to larger countries. The opposition would tell us that this is because here in the Federation, their talents often go underdeveloped and do not lead to a secure employment avenue. It is therefore, Madam Speaker, why this government is establishing the protocols necessary to nurture the talents of our youth. Madam Speaker, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, influenced by our diverse cultural background, are, as one might say, truly the poster child for a cultural melting pot. In the words of the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Honorable Ralph Gonzalez, we are a civilization sui generis. Indeed, Madam Speaker, our culture is one of a kind. Allow me, Madam Speaker, to bring this closer to home. Our students have shown us that they possess the potential to thrive in competitive industries such as tech. This was proven by the CFBC students who developed the Android app affectionately named Basket Turnover. In more recent times, it was proven again when Alex Strawn, the CEO and founder of Genesis Payment Solutions, took home the third-place prize in the OECS Republic Bank Business Model and Pitch Competition against 30 of the most outstanding entrepreneurs in the region. We can see then, Madam Speaker, that the Federation's youth are recognizing the immense value of their creativity and their role as the creators and innovators that drive the modern economy. We witness around us an explosion of these cultural and creative industries within our borders and across the region. However, Madam Speaker, the development of this sector will only reach a fraction of its full potential. That is unless, Madam Speaker, the members of this most honorable House take the courage to pass this resolution. Now, Madam Speaker, I'm sure the question still lingers. How will a resolution about culture empower local entrepreneurs to succeed in creative industries? This cultural policy outlines the systems and laws necessary to hold cultural heritage as an economic enterprise that benefits our citizens. It details the challenges and opportunities that can be encountered in development of a cultural industry. For example, Madam Speaker, the first actionable point of the resolution acknowledges that there is an absence of proper avenues for world-class presentations of culture and entertainment. The passing of this resolution will facilitate the release of the funds necessary to promote these creative industries. This will materialize itself in the construction of performing arts centers, green lights for more small business loans, and trade agreements that put our local creative products on the global market. Madam Speaker, my government endeavors to create the environment necessary for our musicians, designers, makeup artists, artistic production managers, and other artists to thrive, who are often overlooked as real jobs, in favor of more traditional ventures for investment and support. We, the government, in this resolution, honor our commitment to our citizens by approving more business loans to entrepreneurs in this industry. These creative businesses are real businesses too, and deserving of all the various concessions that the wider business sector can access. We, the government, also mandates that the Ministries of Finance and Trade, respectively, develop the protocols to engage youth cultural entrepreneurship. These will take the form of special incentives for registration as a small business, concessions and waivers on fees, taxes, duties, and charges, especially on inputs necessary for the establishment of their enterprise. Already, Madam Speaker, the benefits of this policy are self-evident, and we have not even begun to touch on intellectual property, for which the second point of the resolution deals directly. This government appreciates that the promotion of cultural or creative industries, festivals, and youth engagement, and youth entrepreneurship is directly related to the recognition of the creations of these activities as intellectual property. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, and Foreign Affairs, all ministries under my responsibility, in collaboration with the Ministry of Culture, will embark on the task of upgrading the current laws relating to intellectual property. This is essential to forming a more modern and comprehensive system that protects local creators from piracy and intellectual property theft. Now, Madam Speaker, I can spend the entire day just listing the marvelous opportunities held within this resolution, but there is no need to. The evidence speaks for itself, as we can see in many other countries, the impact that a cultural policy has on its economy. Here in the region alone, Jamaica and Trinidad are the leaders of this, where the export of cultural products make up significant portions of their GDP. Trinidad and Tobago implemented its own cultural policy in 1999, 3 years after Jamaica. In it, I would just like to highlight Section 8.6, which pledges that their government will, and I quote, provide the resources for the creation, production, and distribution of commercially viable products that will ensure their competitiveness in the global market, end quote. Today, the government of Trinidad and Tobago reaps the rewards of their investments. Madam Speaker, we can see with our own eyes the evidence that a well-executed cultural policy can lead to the creation of jobs and empowerment of youth artists. It is high time the Federation implements its own. I argue, Madam Speaker, that cultural industries are not as intangible as their name might suggest. They can be the seeds for real, substantial economic growth, financial resilience, youth empowerment, talent development, and employment. The most popular example can be accredited to the global powerhouse of cultural export. Scarcely can one now surf the web, scroll through social media, or watch television without seeing for yourself the surge in popularity for Korean music or K-pop, or Korean film, also known as K-dramas. Many young persons across the globe are fans of BTS and Blackpink, music groups that have dominated not only the Asian market, but also penetrated the music industry in the US and Europe. What is often unknown, however, Madam Speaker, is that South Korea's newfound surge in popularity was not the happenstance it appears to be. In 2008, during the global financial crisis, the government of South Korea invested in the creation of a Ministry of Culture with a department dedicated to K-pop. Now, 12 years later, BTS alone would earn the Korean government $4.7 billion US in GDP. Now, I'm sure, Madam Speaker, I'm not the only one in the room who agrees that this level of forward thinking to develop culture into a global export panned out in the end to be a priceless investment made by the South Korean government. This success was not a product of their sheer size or money, but the innovative and intuitive way they approached their cultural heritage as an entity worthy of legislation, structure, and development into a successful economic enterprise. Madam Speaker, personally, I don't find it far-fetched to believe that economic growth of similar nature can be achieved in the Federation. But it can only be done if we, the government, receives the support to pass the legislation our young artists need to strive in this industry. Our own creators like Dejour and the jobs his shows create, such as set designers and managers, sound system specialists, band musicians, and event organizers, hold a tremendous impact on the economy, which should not be taken lightly. Otley Mitchell and the publishers, editors, and illustrators who collaborate to create her literary works deserve the opportunity to market her books not just locally, but to have a shot at widespread success on the global market. Now, Madam Speaker, the opposition might argue that the current capacity of our Ministry of Culture cannot adequately support and uphold this culture policy. and that it may be too ambitious to enact. But, Madam Speaker, in the same way, one might have said that it was ambitious to believe that a movie made on our shores could be featured in film festivals across the globe. A Rose Between Thorns, the work directed by Mr. Nigel Tucapo-Lewis, is just the tip of the iceberg of the creative potential of our people. This policy is key for artists like him to succeed here, throughout the region, and on the global stage. And this piece of legislation itself will be the tool used to build the capacity of our Ministry of Culture into an adept body for the development of our cultural assets. As I wrap up, Madam Speaker, I wish to implore the members of government and opposition to do what they know is right. If the resolution won't be passed for the impact it will have on the preservation of our cultural heritage, then let it be done for the cultivation of the talents of our youth and empowerment of our entrepreneurs. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Dominique Williams, Minister of International Trade, Commerce, Industry, Tourism, Consumer Affairs, Foreign Affairs, Nevis Affairs, and Civil Aviation.
Madam Speaker, I stand to make my contribution on the resolution on the floor. But first, I'd like to congratulate you, Madam Speaker, on your appointment as Speaker of the House. It shows that women today, once they push far, they have goals, they can reach where you are. It's evident. Madam Speaker, I'd like to touch and focus on Section A and B of the resolution that has been put forward by the government. Section A reads, effectively allows for ease of access funds by entrepreneurs wishing to expand their reach within the orange economy. Now, Madam Speaker, I agree with this. Persons who are foreseen as prominent or even uprising entrepreneurs in the creative arts industry should be able to have easy access to funds, especially those who want to expand in the orange economy. But, Madam Speaker, having easy access to funds sounds all good and dandy. The question that we must ask ourselves, how will these prominent entrepreneurs manage funds given to them? Telling them how to fish but not teaching them. Madam Speaker, persons might be well talented, a professional at the art, but can they manage themselves? This now stems into training and being educated in their field, making sure they are not only an expert of the art, but business oriented, able to manage themselves. And here comes another question. Do we have educators? Are persons today educated to educate persons in their particular field? What is also important is, will avenues of opportunity be presented? And I hope it's not as mediocre as we have seen in the past. Madam Speaker, can you imagine large companies, promoters, contracting our local creatives, yet not paying them the full amounts due for the job that they did, and giving them the runarounds after? Madam Speaker, I honestly believe that members opposite are missing steps, as they always do. I believe there should be some sort of structure, proper structure, some type of organization that deal with the registration of our local creatives and our groups. Madam Speaker, due to the different aspects of the creative arts industry, fashion designers, photographers, dancers, persons who chaperone shows, film directors. Oh, and mentioning film directors, member opposite mentioned the Rose Between Thorns, the film director in St.Kitts. He directed the film. Can you imagine when he reached out to government officials, companies, people in the private sector in initial stages? He got nothing, no support but from one, Madam Speaker. One person saw the vision and chose to invest in him. Can I tell you, I sat down and spoke to him. And Madam Speaker, it's absurd that The government can now boast about festivals that he has. He has indeed won festivals, but they are boasting, but no support, Madam Speaker. When the film was completed and released, public gave a big round of applause, big song and dance, but the support again was not there. In fact, I may add, he won, as I said, he won festivals. In every aspect he entered, he won festivals. The film won festivals. Madam Speaker, the government is not willing to invest in our people. This policy sounds all fun and dandy. We want to see the work. Something like a film commission can be introduced to create jobs, Madam Speaker. Film companies may come to St. Kitts and bring their crew. But Madam Speaker, we have young creatives that are young local creatives that are capable of doing the same jobs. Let's make reference to Barbados. Under the National Cultural Foundation, which deals with different facets of culture, they have a film commission. And because of that being in place, a film company was able to employ a local producer and in turn paid upwards $2 million. This would be a great boost to our economy, Madam Speaker. We can find more information about that, about their cultural foundation on their site, nfc.bb. And you will see how much effort is being made to make sure their culture is not only secured, but a working industry. And so, we have to ask ourselves, we must ask ourselves, why are we putting this policy in place? And why only now? Member opposite again mentioned that when we were in government, we attempted to do the policy. But Madam Speaker, it was an attempt, and I hope that this government is not just attempting also, but some growth will be done. This should be done, this should have been done a long time, I agree. And yes, ease of funds, but I hope we're not throwing down the money down a rabbit's hole. It seems to be their tendencies. Madam Speaker, where are these funds coming from? How will the selection process take place? What kind of funds? Is it loans? Madam Speaker, member opposite mentioned loans. Or is it grants? And if loans, how will the interest be paid? And now in our COVID situation, Madam Speaker, all this we have to look at. Madam Speaker, item B talks about them promoting the importance of intellectual property and provides further protection for those who may hold copyright. And now I say this again, Madam Speaker, the efforts are indeed commendable, but I don't think they are looking at it from all angles. What is a copyright? It's sad to say people don't know. People don't know that we have an intellectual property office. The place that deals with keeping our art safe. Madam Speaker, the entrepreneurs know how to protect their art, their work. Madam Speaker, what I'm getting at is you cannot be a lawyer unless you go to law school. You cannot be a police unless you go to police training school. And you cannot be a doctor unless you go to med school. We want to kill the people then. We must have some sort of training for persons who want to venture into the avenue that fits them. Madam Speaker, is the public aware of the importance of this intellectual property and copyrights? Are they supporting as they should? All these are things we have to look at, Madam Speaker. We have to understand the importance. And if we do an ad on Facebook with a local artist, and it won't be red flagged. These are things we have to prevent. What will be the penalty for copyright infringement? How will it be enforced? Now, Madam Speaker, I want to divert a bit. Well, it may seem like a diversion because we are here to speak about culture. And I may be wrong, but when I read this resolution, it seems as though they got the title wrong. Perhaps it should have been a resolution to adopt the National Creative Arts Policy. Madam Speaker, I don't think they know the definition of culture. Hence why the Department of Culture is treated like a bastard child. And it's sad, Madam Speaker. It's absurd. Culture can be defined as the way of life from conception to death. The way we live. All this is considered as culture. Madam Speaker, my colleague will touch on education, but if I may have an input, I feel as though we are really lacking. And not just in the education system, but when it comes to public awareness. Madam Speaker, let's look at our national dish. Now, you and I may know what it consists of, but there are people in our Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis that have no idea. Yes, it was taught in school, but they're more focused on steps how to make lemonade than our national dish. Well, maybe it's our national drink. Madam Speaker, farming, producing, all these are part of our culture, where we come from. And I'm just not talking about the yam and tanya, Madam Speaker. What about the secondary part of making them into now chips and exporting? This now can create jobs and help to bring revenue into our country, Madam Speaker. Culture, not only in the aspect of creative arts, but in agriculture and all other aspects. Madam Speaker, I hope that this policy is being Madam Speaker, I hope that now this policy is being considered. Our young people will be able to tell us about persons like Elimat and Mapstick. I mean, I don't even know who is Mapstick. Madam Speaker, in the interest of time, I'll end here. But going forward, I want the government to take a holistic approach. Look at it from all the different types of angles. And most importantly, listen to the people. I have ventured out and I got my feedback from my constituents, such as the Commission and the Association, that how they want to be governed, Madam Speaker, what they want to be put in place. They put me here, and I will represent them. The government needs to settle down and focus on what they are doing. These are words of encouragement for them. I hope they take heed, Madam Speaker. May it please you.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Member for St. Christopher 1, Honorable Alaric Arachi. I'd like to take the opportunity as well to recognize the presence of the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister, Honorable Sean K. Richards. Thank you for joining us.
Madam Speaker, I rise to make a brief contribution on the resolution before this Honorable House. As we all could agree, the culture of a nation is its identity to the entire world, and having a vital and strong culture boosts the awareness and the impact one has on the world. To this extent, our government has deemed it of utmost importance that this resolution see safe passage before this Honorable House. Madam Speaker, allow me to shed some light on why I stand in support of this resolution by outlining a few points, be it the creation of avenues for the expression of culture and its integration into the educational system, the importance of protecting and practicing our culture, as well as the need to make preservations for links to be created and maintained between the cultural sector and other important sectors of government, such as tourism and technology. Madam Speaker, as the Minister of Education, I have the opportunity of knowing that in our high school, we offer subjects like theater arts, music, physical education, and history. And if it is that the members opposite did any of these subjects, we will realize that one factor these subjects have in common is that they all lend themselves to be an avenue in which students can express and interact with our culture, whether in drama, dance, song, storytelling, sports, and even our own heritage. By implementing this cultural policy, we'll be able to harness the creativity of our youths and boost our culture to great heights never yet seen by teaching the youths as early as preschool and primary school traditional games such as Manchambo and the story behind it. And that would encourage a sense of unwavering cultural identity. These games, Madam Speaker, will be played during their playtime at school, and the stories of our history and focal groups, such as the Clown and Makajumbi, along with their origin, will be taught during storytelling and history classes. This will teach our youths the morals and values we hold so dear as citizens of this great federation. Currently, Madam Speaker, The Curriculum Development Unit is working on revamping our curriculum to better suit our federation. What better time than now to implement this policy? Madam Speaker, this policy would not only pass on the torch to the younger generation, but it also protects the culture as we all have grown to love so dear and encourage the practice of the said culture. Madam Speaker, look at the impact of our own local artists upon our youths. This needs to be safeguarded and nurtured to the extent where the artists can make a living off of their talent. And if the members opposite dare to question what impact, Madam Speaker, allow me to draw their attention to just one simple example. Reflect on the work of Mr. Ruckus H.E. at the Bastia High School chant competition held yearly every sports term, and the way this competition has made Bastia High known for its school spirit. The energy, Madam Speaker, that this simple yet impactful competition has presented for the culture of the school in every single BHS student, past and present, is beyond question. So much so that if one start a BHS start, you are sure to receive an echo. If this policy is given safe passage, it will pave the way for all artists, new and old, to showcase their talent and our culture to the world. This, Madam Speaker, would not just happen by giving gigs, but by creating a cultural register that we can pool our talents together and collectively present it on a regional and global level. While I'm speaking on regional level, Madam Speaker, I am sure we all are aware of the wonderful work that our representative did at the CARIFESTA 2019 in Trinidad, and the positive feedback we received for a job well done. This cultural policy aims to keep that kind of impact on everyone who comes in contact with our people, hereby boosting tourism and global awareness. Madam Speaker, it was the Jamaican 2014 Minister of Education, Ronald Thwaites, who once said in an article posted by the Jamaican Observer on February 7, 2014, and I quote, if our young people are to settle down, learn well, and appreciate who they are, then we have to craft a new understanding of cultural studies in our school. Madam Speaker, this very policy aims to prepare our people to pursue careers in cultural studies at one of our region's top universities, be it the University of the Virgin Islands, UVI, or Mono University of the West Indies, UWI. This culture would seek to provide scholarships so that the flame lit by taking culture-based subject in high school do not die at the end of one's high school year, and students will feel free to go on and study culture, knowing that they can make a suitable living from it. Secondly, Madam Speaker, it is critical that our culture sector be linked with other sectors of the government and is no longer treated like a bastard child as it was in the time when the members opposite hold this very same seat. Culture, Madam Speaker, goes hand in hand with almost, if not all, sectors of government. For without a culture of our own, what are we truly offering the world as an island? Think about it. The Ministry of Tourism needs money. They put on a cultural event, whether it be a music festival or a simple essay on one of our heritage sites. The culture of our people is placed on display to gain the funds needed. The Prime Minister needs to impress a foreign investor. He simply calls on a cultural group of our country to put on an excellent show, which is sure to seal the deal. The Ministry of Education, Science and Technology has also recognized the role of culture in achieving education for all and has begun designing unique programs to keep students interested. This very same ministry has policies that allows pupils in the early school years to learn using their local language and emphasizes the need for extracurricular activity such as sports and cultural arts festival. Madam Speaker, every sector of government utilizes culture, and this policy will ensure and preserve the relationship between the Ministry of Culture and all other ministries. The cultural policy being proposed here today will also create a database website to allow easy access for cultural information so that the knowledge of our more experienced individuals like Mr. Zach Nisbet and Mr. Pension can be passed on in a more modern and timely fashion, and as such, make this information accessible for years to come, not just only to our locals, but to our tourists and our foreign investors alike. This database will pool all aspects of culture, tangible and intangible, to one general point where everything on our culture and of our federation can easily be accessed. In closing, Madam Speaker, this cultural policy has a large amount of potential, as myself and the members of this forward-thinking government has presented here today. And it is truly my hope that the members opposite will see the possibilities of this policy and not play petty politics with it. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Jelani Bell, Minister of Health, Education, Youth, Sports, and Communication Technology.
Madam Speaker, I rise before this Honorable House in solidarity, not only with my fellow members of the opposition, but with every citizen in this country. As a member opposite stated, culture does not only affect the government or the opposition for that matter, it affects us all. As a youth, coming up through the schooling system, I was always taught that as a Kittitian, you should be proud of your heritage, proud of your culture. Yet, Madam Speaker, while this is the case for every member of this opposition team, I often wonder if those in the government bench are in fact proud of their culture. For you see, if they were proud of their culture, they would understand the magnitude, the importance that it holds. Myself, along with many other citizens, often wonder if they realize that thousands of people travel thousands of miles every single year just to get a taste of the culture of St. Kitts and Nevis. Madam Speaker, this federation has gone far too long without a proper cultural policy in place. And while my opposition does acknowledge this cultural policy brought forth by the government, we do not wish for our acknowledgement to be confused with satisfaction. The resolution before us, while a good start, lacks the depth, thought, and consideration that a forward-looking cultural policy is supposed to reflect. Madam Speaker, I am not interested in pointlessly insulting the members of the government, even though I am sure they have spent the last few days brainstorming new ways to insult myself and this opposition, as opposed to thinking about opportunities for innovation. I am interested in advancement, in this case, as it relates to the use of a proper cultural policy to advance this federation and the lives of its citizens. Madam Speaker, in this resolution before us, it states that the government wishes to make provisions for the linkages between the cultural sector and those of tourism, trade, and technology. What this government is saying is that in the midst of a pandemic, this federation should aim to entertain, investing large sums of money into other ministries to support a linkage to the cultural sector that more than likely will be for sure more than anything else. On paper, the suggestion might sound like it comes from a place of good intention, but one must face the fact that this is simply is not possible anytime in the near future. As previously stated, my opposition is very proud of our culture and is of the view that if properly harnessed, can be beneficial to this federation. However, more than anything, this team supports the holistic growth and development of St. Kitts and Nevis. There are other ways to promote culture in the federation besides dumping large amounts of money that we simply cannot afford to spend at this time. The deadly novel coronavirus has had a significant negative impact on our tourism industry. With tourism, along with manufacturing being the two biggest industries in this federation, one can imagine that our economy took a serious blow, one from which we are still evidently reeling from. Make no mistake, the development of the cultural sector is a worthy investment so long as we have the money to support it and adequately support ourselves as a country. Madam Speaker, the member opposite rightfully said tourism makes up a large amount of our GDP. With that industry now stifled, how does the government plan to safely facilitate this costly linkage? The government also stated in this resolution that they wish to integrate into the educational system the importance of the protection and practice of our culture, language, and heritage. This, Madam Speaker, quite frankly, is what sounds like another empty promise put forward by the government. The concept of protecting our culture and our heritage is one that has been voiced since I was in primary school. Yet, Madam Speaker, in recent times, this federation has more children dancing in TikToks than we've ever had dancing in masquerade. There needs to be the enforcement of protecting the costumes of our cultural heritage. The clowns don't even wear the original masks or bells. What will this government do to make this change concrete? How will they set themselves apart from the previous attempts where only the bare minimum was done for culture? Words on paper does not equal action, and the people of this federation have been demanding action. The citizens have heard nothing of substance from the government in terms of implementing the importance of our culture into the school system. For the government to move forward with the implementation of a forward-thinking cultural policy, they should first foster closer relations with the Department of Culture and the general public. In preparation for this debate, the opposition had a meeting with a senior officer in the Department of Culture, where what was revealed was that the government and the Department of Culture could and should have a closer relation. Many activities which you would think the Department of Culture is responsible for are in fact undertaken by other industries. If we are to move forward as a federation, better relations must be fostered. Culture is of the people. If it is to be properly developed, the voice and opinions of the citizens must be heard. Connect with the old folks. Though often ignored, the stories they tell of a time gone can help to develop culture better than any of us can. Madam Speaker, as I bring my contribution before this Honorable House to a close, I wish for the record to show that I do not come before this government bench as an enemy, but instead as a concerned citizen. A citizen that wants holistic development for St. Kitts and Nevis. and all its citizens. Holistic development that cannot come if such a resolution would come to pass. Pointless conflict between the government and the opposition would lead this country nowhere good. My opposition simply wants the voice of the people to be heard. May it please.
Thank you, Honorable Joel Smith, member for St. Christopher 5.
Madam Speaker, this morning I rise to give my views on the resolution on a national cultural policy that is before this Honorable House. I recognize the importance of a resolution of such nature in establishing a clear management approach, not only for conserving, but for promoting an appreciation of culture. Culture has been defined in perhaps its simplest form as the way of life of a people. In fact, it was the great Mahatma Gandhi who once said, "A nation's culture resides in the hearts and in the soul of its people." Madam Speaker, before delving into the substantive matters of the debate, permit me to provide some definitions as context. Culture is the dynamic reservoir of ways of thinking and doing accumulated over time. With this in mind, I believe that before looking to a potential policy, it is necessary to understand where St. Kitts and Nevis is now. Clause F of the resolution speaks to the implementation of a structure for administration and financing of culture with the Federation, while the National Cultural Policy, as outlined on page 15, seeks to promote the St. Kitts Nevis cultural identity as one of the central pillars of national development. It is on this basis that we must consider the following questions. Do we know what makes us uniquely Kittitian and Nevisian? In other words, what really is a true expression of Kittitian Nevisian culture? What steps are required to present a Kittitian Nevisian cultural identity? Is it passing a policy? Or is it a cultural education or a re-education? Madam Speaker, when we hear the words reggae, Bob Marley, Red Stripe, and Bolt, Jamaica immediately comes to mind because this is their cultural identity. Marshall Montano, Soca, and Steel Pan immediately takes our mind to Trinidad. What triggers our Kittitian Nevisian identity? Is it the mention of New Vibes, Elimat, Cook Up, Mia and Pete, Moko Jumbi, or the string band? Do we know what constitutes our culture and the different elements, or do we have a cultural identity crisis? Madam Speaker, a national cultural policy must foster cohesion among the different aspects and facets of our culture. However, it is important that the people of St. Kitts and Nevis know and appreciate what those are. The policy must be sensitive to all the various issues that are generic to our current environment and our lifestyle as a federation. Our policy cannot be an adaptation of what works in other countries. I recognize policies of several other Caribbean countries have been used as a reference point in drafting this policy. However, Madam Speaker, the difference is these countries already have a clear cultural identity. Madam Speaker, the government has been attempting to draft a national cultural policy since 2005, and here we are in 2020, 15 years later, still without a functional policy. Why? Indifference, technical capacity or funding, or just will to do so? As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Culture had informed the public in his budget presentation in 2018 that a national cultural policy would be successfully tabled at the end of 2018. This is almost 2020 and we don't have that. Madam Speaker, it begs the questions if the government is really ready to give culture the priority focus it deserves, or is it just paying lip service? The creation of a cultural policy cannot just be a theoretical approach, but it must be a practical approach. In our St. Kitts and Nevis, we have a Department of Culture that has little to no impact. The Department of Culture is useful, but what is the use if it has no purview? It has no authority when it comes to the major cultural aspects in our society. Madam Speaker, it is like an afterthought or an unwanted stepchild. Over the last 2 years, the department has been allocated 50% less budgetary support than other departments within the same ministry. Just take a quick look at the 2018 and 2019 budget estimates. Madam Speaker, the Department of Culture will have a pivotal role to play in the implementation of any national cultural policy or the development of any administrative structure. In fact, the National Cultural Policy speaks to equipping the Department of Culture with human and financial resources. As such, we must recognize that before anything can be done, the government must ensure that the department is adequately resourced to support a national cultural policy. Madam Speaker, did you know that since 2015, the department has had a basic fees on its tires, so that to date it still remains understaffed? Again, I refer to the budget estimates for the same period. Madam Speaker, does the government really expect us to believe that after 5 years, monies will magically appear to equip these departments, especially in this current global economic environment? Madam Speaker, let's get real. Madam Speaker, when you have an event and you need a cultural performance, you call the Department of Culture. But when you have a major festival, this falls under someone else's purview. Why is this the case? Does the government not trust this underfunded department? Madam Speaker, the draft policy presented by the government covers several major national events which are now ingrained into our cultural tapestry, including Music Festival, Culturama, and National Carnival. The Music Festival is managed by the Ministry of Tourism. National Carnival is managed by a National Carnival Committee, and Culturama is considered strictly a Nevis festival and managed by the Culturama Committee. Madam Speaker, all of these, along with the traditional cultural art forms, will fall under one national cultural policy umbrella, but who will have the ultimate oversight over this policy? Who will administer it? The Department of Culture must be the focal point of the policy implementation, monitoring and evaluation, but will this ever be a reality? To further complicate matters, just recently, the government created the Ministry of Entertainment, Entrepreneurship and Talent Development. But, Madam Speaker, let's face it, nobody has any idea how this new ministry will feature in the cultural discussion, because right now, we have no idea where this is going yet. And we may never know. Where is this ministry, by the way? Madam Speaker, if a national cultural policy is to be effective, then there must be clear lines of responsibility in the administration of any such policy. The government must harmonize the interplay of all bodies that have oversight over the various cultural facets, or bring them under one umbrella with this policy, and this must be spearheaded by the Department of Culture. Madam Speaker, a functional cultural policy must have responsible political and administrative bodies and economic resources. As we consider the resolution before this Honorable House, we have no clear understanding of what is really Kittish and Nevidian culture, an underfunded Department of Culture with no purview in the event, and no well-structured, consistent relationship among relevant ministries. With all of this, we are firmly of the view that the government is not serious enough about the creation and implementation of national cultural policy. Madam Speaker, we cannot support this resolution unless the government goes back to the drawing board and puts a proper foundation in place so that we may have a well-meaning and functional policy and not just all fraud and no Barbie. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Zara Humphrey, member for St. Christopher 6.
Madam Speaker, I rise once again to wind up this debate. But before I begin, I must ask your indulgence to remind the opposition that we are here to do the people's business. And the comics and the comical antics, leave that on the street. We are here to do the people's business. Madam Speaker, the member for constituency number 1 would have attacked our fund and made a very, very interesting claim. And I was quite disappointed that he doesn't have the confidence in talented individuals to manage their own funds. I was very shaken to hear him say that, because look at successful individuals like Desi Brown. She has perhaps one of the top businesses, not even just top dance companies, but top businesses in St.Kitts. And success means that you're managing your money well. However, if his issue is that the artists can't manage their funds, because trust me, they have managers. Lucas has a manager who is well skilled in money management. So, if you feel that they're not skilled, of course, there's a small business development agency. There's entrepreneurship courses at CFBC. There is a wealth of information on the internet. And he would have asked if there are persons educated in the dance field for training. But there is.
Honorable Member, I would like for you to refer to your colleague opposite as the Honorable Member opposite. And Honorable Member opposite, if it is that you have a contribution that you would like to make to the debate, do so by way of a point of order, please.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. I did not state that we don't have any persons educated to dance, Madam Speaker. I stated that do we have educators to educate persons in their particular fields? There are fields that persons are in that are not prominent. So do we have proper educators to educate those persons?
Point of order acknowledged.
The honorable member would have mentioned that the government is not willing to fund these initiatives, and the entire opposition is of the opinion that the government does not have access to that. The cultural policy its main aim is to educate and to trigger knowledge of our own culture. So while we might say that people don't know our culture, it is to bring the masqueraders to the forefront and to push out the imperialism that we're experiencing. And we want to be able to use this policy as a forward-thinking policy to, reach to the young people. And the same TikToks, these can be used to portray the masqueraders and the Makajumbies and the clowns. And it further is able to promote our economic diversity, and we don't have to, we can now market our culture on the internet. That's what we're looking to do, to make it as diverse, make the culture as diverse, and make it as strategic and as forward-thinking as it can be. And this is just a draft, and we are always welcomed to any suggestion. I mean, we did widespread public consultations, widespread, which I mentioned earlier. But if any member or anybody on the street wants to come and see me or come and see my director, you can. Thank you.
The question is that the resolution that calls for the adoption of the National Cultural Policy for St. Kitts and Nevis be adopted. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The resolution has been adopted.
Introduction of bills.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read a first time the bill shortly entitled the Sexual Harassment Bill 2020.
Madam Speaker, I second the motion.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled the Sexual Harassment Bill 2020 be read for a first time. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Public business.
Madam Speaker, I rise to move the second reading of the bill shortly entitled the Sexual Harassment Bill 2020. Sexual harassment is an urgent and serious matter because it speaks to one of the government's most basic mandates, which is to provide adequate protection for every one of its citizens. One of the ways in which we as a government must protect our people is through comprehensive and robust legislation to ensure that ordinary and law-abiding citizens can go about their lives without fear of attack against their person or property, and a satisfactory means of remedy should any such violation occur. However, Madam Speaker, in this country we have labored far too long under a visionless and unconcerned form of government,
who are afraid to take adequate steps to do that very thing upon which good governance is grounded, the protection of its people. Madam Speaker, in February of 2003, there was a protection from sexual harassment bill that was on the order paper of this National Assembly when the opposition held these benches. There is no indication, however, that this bill actually had a first reading, and it's in fact, Madam Speaker, perhaps because this was some 17 years ago. I don't even recall if this bill ever had been read. While we applaud the efforts of the then government, we recognize that it was evidently neither important enough to materialize into actual legislation, nor effective enough to stimulate significant awareness of this issue. Since almost a decade and a half later, Madam Speaker, sexual harassment has not only remained a fixture of our society, but has arguably risen to alarming proportions. Madam Speaker, there is a culture of behavior that has become normal over the years within the workplace and social settings where unwarranted physical contact, innuendo of a sexual nature, and other over-the-line behavior has come to be more commonplace than basic respect and decency. Unwelcome hugging in professional setting, sexual jokes that are more offensive than funny, lewd advances made on our streets in broad daylight, and in earshot of young, impressionable minds have become the order of the day. Madam Speaker, it begs the question, therefore, do we really know what constitutes sexual harassment? This is why, Madam Speaker, we the government provided legislative framework that seeks to clearly define sexual harassment, giving this previously ambiguous terminology an identifiable and measurable form. Sexual harassment, by the way of the bill before this House, is the unwanted or unwelcome sexual attention of an offensive nature made by by a person who knows or reasonably should know that the attention is unwanted or unwelcome, and that the person to whom it is made may conclude that the conduct was intended to 1. Offend, humiliate, disrespect, or degrade him or her. 2. Intimidate, threaten, or compel him or her by putting him or her in fear of being placed at a disadvantage or prejudice if he or she does not submit to the sexual harassment, or create a hostile environment for him or her, or violate his or her dignity. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I echo the words of Tracy Robinson in her article, Why We Need Sexual Harassment Laws in the Caribbean, that sexual harassment is a form of gender-based violence and a violation of the right to equality, life, liberty, and security. Madam Speaker, this bill addresses a loophole in the legal system that allows offenders to get away with the heinous acts against their victims, and due to the absence of legislation like the one before this Honorable House today, their cases go unreported or uninvestigated. But no longer, Madam Speaker, no longer should men and women be afraid in their own bodies. No longer should they fear reporting these instances. No longer would they live in fear of the repercussions that their report may cause. No longer, Madam Speaker, will their cries go unheard or their claims go uninvestigated. Madam Speaker, without knowledge, we as a people be doomed to repeat our mistakes and risk being left behind our regional and global peers. And we in St. Kitts and Nevis suffer a severe lack of knowledge on this particular issue. Many of our citizens, both civilians and key public servants alike, simply do not know what constitutes sexual harassment. And because we do not know what actions and utterances constitute this offense, perpetrators are free to commit heinous indiscretions against others with utter impunity. Likewise, Madam Speaker, many victims are left to suffer these gross indignities without even knowing that such an act constitutes a violation against their human rights and that there could be an adequate recourse within the law. And that, Madam Speaker, this is because currently there are minimal workplace policies that guide employees and employees alike. But this bill, Madam Speaker, makes it mandatory, according to Clause 12, subsection 1, that every entity, whether private or public, must implement a policy which reads, every employer shall issue a policy statement in writing concerning the prevention of sexual harassment and the protection of employee or third party in the workplace, and take steps that are reasonably required to bring the policy statement referred to in paragraph A to the attention of all employees. Madam Speaker, the blame for this severe cultural deficit in sensitivity and understanding about the basic human rights and this rampant perpetuation in our society can and should be laid squarely at the feet of a former administration who has left egregious and inexcusable gaps in crucial piece of legislation that has already tabled by a number of our Caribbean peers. And when it hasn't been passed, Madam Speaker, significant inroads are being made around the region to raise awareness and move towards legislative change. In Jamaica this year, for instance, there is a large support for sexual harassment legislation with a committee in place currently reviewing a draft sexual harassment bill. And notably, a study published in the Jamaican Observer in August 2020 reveals that 85% of Jamaicans believe this bill should pass. Here in St. Kitts, Madam Speaker, we are woefully short of available statistics on the prevalence of sexual harassment because we currently have no such formal recognition in criminal law. This means many of the most common forms of harassment, such as men making inappropriate verbal advances towards women or requesting or suggesting sexual favors in the workplace, are unlikely to ever result in criminal charge unless some physical assault had also occurred. Madam Speaker, I spoke about women up there, but I do not want the listening audience or my colleagues to summon the idea that this sexual harassment could only be done to women, but could be done to men alike. Therefore, if someone commits an act that falls within the definition that I have previously laid out, the victim's only recourse in criminal law is if the act rises to the level of a physical assault. Because these actions are not punishable by criminal law. Many victims are left without legal remedy. Due to this lack of protection, these behaviors have gone unpunished and unreported for far too long. This bill will seek to lay out a comprehensive definition of sexual harassment, which is fully inclusive of both verbal and physical aspects of sexual harassment. Such offenses will be punishable by criminal law, which will serve as a deterrent to would-be perpetrators. Victims would have a clear basis for recognizing when harassment has occurred and given an avenue to report violations against themselves and others. Madam Speaker, an increasing reporting would provide vital data that can inform additional policies and well-needed protection for our Federation's citizens. Madam Speaker, until we are able to bring clear and comprehensive legislation, our citizens, both male and female alike, will continue to suffer undue violations of their basic human rights. The bill before us outlines a number of acts that would not now rise to the level of criminal offense, providing crucial protections and preventative measures to safeguard society at all levels and provide swift and fair recourse to those affected. Madam Speaker, permit me to draw attention to some of the more noteworthy aspects of the bill. Among other actions, the bill would, and I quote, set out the circumstances to be satisfied in order for an act of sexual harassment to be constituted, and it identifies the types of conduct that would amount to sexual harassment. The conduct includes making sexual advances, sexual comments about a person in his or her sight, and hearing or sexual gestures, that are unwelcome to the person and providing a person with unwelcome sexual images or graphics. The bill would prohibit a person who supplies goods, services, or facilities for the benefit of the public or a section of the public from subjecting the intended recipient of those goods to sexual harassment. Madam Speaker, it would also prohibit a person or employee of an educational authority which provides facilities for vocational training in order to assist another person to become fit for employment from subjecting that person to sexual harassment. It would impose an obligation on every employer to issue a policy statement concerning sexual harassment in the workplace, and would require an employer to take appropriate action on becoming aware, reasonably suspicious, or informed of an act of sexual harassment. Madam Speaker, this bill will protect those seeking to report sexual offense by prohibiting a person from victimizing or imposing a detriment on a person who has made or proposes to make a complaint under the Act. Madam Speaker, unlike the feeble and forgettable attempt by the opposition to read a shoddily constructed sexual harassment bill once during their term, my government, through this legislation, is seeking to break decades of fear, stigma, culturally accepted abuse, and inequality. This bill seeks to abolish heinous acts of abuses of power, addresses the critical concerns within gender-based violence, protect and empower vulnerable members of society, combat generation of ignorance by providing clear definitions and courses of action that did not previously exist in law, and most of all, restore confidence, order, safety, and peace of mind for the citizens of this great federation. It is indeed a concerted effort that will be needed not just in the passing of this legislation, but in the enforcement and the education and sensitization of the nation to the new realities by which we will all inevitably have to abide with when this legislation is passed. And this is with the unified effort that my fellow ministers and I present to you fully formulated framework to support this legislation, including effective awareness and education, which will be outlined by Honorable Theodore Poussard, the Minister of Gender Affairs. And of course, with a tender issue as sexual harassment, we intend to implement strict procedures to ensure that the highest degree of sensitivity and confidentiality will be expounded upon by our Attorney General, Honorable Eustacia Morton, who will also speak to the specific structures that will support this legislation. And of course, we understand that the significance of robust workplace policies, since that is key area where violations occur. The Honorable Sinette Warner, Minister for Labor, would outline how we intend to make the workplace a safe, sensitive, and suitable environment for our labor force, protecting them from the pitfalls of a previous lack of attention to their basic rights. Madam Speaker, in closing, it's my administration's hope that the passing of this bill, our society will begin to normalize reporting instances of sexual harassment, normalize awareness of what constitutes sexual harassment, normalize sensitivity and safety on our streets, normalize the adoption of evolved patterns of thought and socialization, and most importantly, Madam Speaker, become a society that looks out for the rights and freedom of its ordinary citizens, providing the protection and support necessary to grow and develop our nation in what it can be, a place where peace, dignity, respect, and safety abounds. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Malachi Ferguson, Minister of Finance, National Security, Sustainable Development, Constituency Empowerment, Information, and Human Resource Management.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second the bill shortly entitled the Sexual Harassment Bill 2020 and hereby lend my support with a brief contribution before this Honorable House. Madam Speaker, I do not rise today to give frail and meaningless words, but to provide substantial answers to appease the issues faced by our people. As the Minister of Social Development and Gender Affairs, I am pleased to present and discuss the Sexual Harassment Bill before you this morning. Before further indulgence, I wish to emphasize the definition that was ably mentioned by my Prime Minister, that sexual harassment is an unwanted or unwelcome sexual attention of an offensive nature made by a person who knows or reasonably should know that the attention is unwanted or unwelcomed. We, the government, believe that our people can be protected against this societal dysfunction through the bill, which would protect them by dealing with and remedying acts that constitute sexual harassment and the various persons involved in the act, especially in customer relations, the housing industry, and education. Madam Speaker, too often there have been unreported situations in which customers are sexually harassed by employees of various businesses. Oftentimes in cases, employees use their position, job reputation, or sometimes the nature of their job to exhibit dominance and to use as a cover to pursue and harass customers. The health industry is one industry that perfectly embodies this concept, as many doctors, physicians, and other health professionals are accused of sexually harassing patients during medical procedures, especially when they are under anesthetic. Can you imagine these so-called professionals with their unethical behaviors? However, Madam Speaker, don't get me wrong, I am in no way blaspheming our health professionals, but just emphasizing the fact that some individuals in high positions often abuse their power and authority to take advantage of the average man or woman. One such case was articled in 2019 by the New Haven Register, which detailed a Yale Medical School professor who sexually harassed 5 students at a research facility he operated on the island of St. Kitts, beginning in 1994. Yale's university policies and procedures, however, failed to stop the abuse, according to an investigation commissioned by the university themselves. Madam Speaker, due to the non-existence of law that caters to sexual harassment at the time, we could not have intervened. That is why we are here today, Madam Speaker, to propose a legislation that does not leave injustices such as these unanswered. On the other hand, the idea expressed by Clause 4 also suggests that the customer too can also be the perpetrator. I refer to a 2018 article from CNN which indicates that employees, especially in the restaurant industry, who are required to be welcoming and kind to customers, are often taken advantage of by customers to make sexual advances. This is evident in many businesses that is focused on customer satisfaction. A Guardian News article confirms this issue as it reported in a Canadian study that indicated that the majority of retail workers being sexually harassed were reluctant to report these crimes due to the emphasis of customer satisfaction in their working environments. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, employees that are targeted by customers are normally of a lower socioeconomic status, as employees at this level are often young teenagers who are new to the world of works. Madam Speaker, though I refer to a foreign authority, its concepts and statements relate to a reality that is no different from what the people of our Federation face today. if our reality on sexual harassment was different to theirs, then there would have been no need for us to address this issue in our bill. We need to protect our employees and customers in their transactional processes because it eliminates the fear of sexual harassment in this setting and assures persons that there is law that can protect against such acts in all fairness and justice whenever they may occur. Secondly, I also wish to highlight the issue of sexual harassment in the housing industry. Madam Speaker, we understand that sexual harassment is a gender-based violence and that it affects both men and women. But in the housing industry, it was quite evident that women were mostly affected than men. Madam Speaker, can you believe that there are persons who are prisoners in their own homes? A 2019 report by ABC News detailed the disheartening stories of women who were sexually harassed by either their landlord, housing inspector, or housing manager, all of whom were male. These perpetrators of this pervasive crime targeted the vulnerabilities of these victims and used it along with their ability to evict them to pursue and cover up this heinous crime. Moreover, these vulnerabilities included their victims' ties to drug abuse, among other criminal offenses, and their socio-economic status. Perpetrators utilized these weaknesses as a way of convincing victims that they would not be believed if they choose to report it to authorities. Madam Speaker, this source defines situations that could possibly be occurring in our society to which we might be unaware due to the lack of legislation that would have encouraged persons to make reports. In addition, the ravages of COVID-19 has given birth to a global economic crisis in which many persons were terminated or laid off from their jobs. Therefore, with the additional financial strains from COVID-19, Madam Speaker, I strongly believe that this would increase the frequency and chances of sexual harassment within our communities. For example, I could be a laid-off married worker who can't seem to afford my rent with the money that I'm getting, and then my landlord might become frustrated because of me not being able to pay him, and he might just use sexual advances against me. Madam Speaker, in a way too, in which he thinks would repay him the money that in this case I would not be able to pay. Despite these possibilities, Madam Speaker, the people can rest assured that this Team Vision government has ensured that the bill addresses the issue of sexual harassment between a landlord and a tenant by prohibiting it through the bill so as to foster a friendly environment in which business can be carried out in the fairest way possible. Lastly, I wish to shed light on sexual harassment in relation to education. The National Women's Law Center states that sexual harassment is a widespread problem that adversely affects students' emotional and educational development. These effects often leave students with anxiety, distress, confusion, loss of self-esteem, and depression, Madam Speaker. The University of West Indies also concurs with these statements in a presentation entitled Sexual Harassment and Abuse of Student Athletes, in which similar effects was stated. For clearer understanding of the issue, I refer to statistics from a recent study by the American Association of University Women, which found that 83% of female and 79% of male students in grades 8 through 11 has been sexually harassed at school in ways that interfered with their lives. 1/3 of the surveyed students, that being 20% of boys and 44% of girls, said that they fear being sexually harassed during the school day. In an effort to combat this issue, educational institutions must develop their own policies against sexual harassment. These policies, when created, must be publicized to staff, students, and third parties, and should indicate that there is zero tolerance for sexual harassment. When creating such a policy, it is important that the policy is user-friendly, involves all members of the school's community, has a clear definition of sexual harassment and the possible punishments that comes with them, and also a formal complaint procedure. Madam Speaker, I can't stress this enough. Our children are our future, and we must protect them from crimes such as sexual harassment because it can cause them trauma that leaves long-term effects that would adversely affect their lives. In an effort to deal with the issues of sexual harassment, it is important to educate and to sensitize our children about the dangers of sexual harassment, and also to implement this topic in areas such as family life education. Madam Speaker, as I conclude, I implore this Honorable House to consider the passing of the Sexual Harassment Bill 2020, as it would not only protect our people, but provide a base upon which we can build and make future amendments to ensure that the law is commensurate with our ever-evolving society. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister. Honorable Theodore Prasad, Minister of Human Settlement, Insurance, Social Security, Ecclesiastical Affairs, Social Development, and Gender Affairs.
Madam Speaker, I rise to make a brief contribution on the bill. Madam Speaker, it pains me, it pains all of us to be in this Honorable House discussing such a dark and gloomy topic. An act that calls into question the decency and moral compass of some people, and sadly, forces us to engage in a discourse on a subject matter that is a threat to any progressive society. We are content in saying that anyone who has the gall to argue against the adoption of this bill shows a thought process so foilable that if you run a finger against it, it runs like sand through an hourglass. As we are currently neck deep in uncharted waters of this pandemic, we sadly allowed a greater threat to arise. Madam Speaker, I ask, why? Why must we send our daughters, mothers, fathers, brothers out to the store to purchase some milk? Send them to school, or any space for that matter, only to have them return with a bag full of trauma, blood-chilling fear, and resentment for the society in which they live. It is important for us not only to pass this bill, but to guarantee that every crevice is covered so that all parties involved are dealt with in a fair way. In that capacity, we believe that a few important informations were not added. The government has not
anywhere in their bill make any provisions to curb psychological effects on victims or the falsely accused. Let us take, for example, Clause 20, which does not highlight or mention any psychological assistance. However, they do highlight that sexual harassment can be psychological. In an article published by Society and Mental Health, Jason M. Hall, entitled The Impact of Sexual Harassment on Depressive Symptoms During the Early Occupational Career, quoted, harassment is associated with increased risk of anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as diminished self-esteem, self-confidence, and psychological well-being, end quote. This shows that harassment possesses a significant negative effect on the psychological mechanisms of an individual. Sexual harassment also affects these individuals years after the event has taken place and influence not only their employment life, which also has runoff effects, but also their social and love lives. How can we protect our women when it is often the case that any attempt at challenging the status quo or defending themselves is often the victim of falling on deaf ears? Time and time again, we forget or even belittle the gravity in which mental health holds, which is why we, the opposition, recommend funding or assistance in funding of a mandatory psychological screening coupled with therapy sessions to combat the gross effects of harassment on an individual. This to be administered on the victims and, in the event, falsely accused during and after the court proceedings to ensure that these individuals are in the right frame of mind and are able to cope with what has happened. It is perceived in Clause 25 that 500 attorneys is sufficient enough to combat the malicious and devious intent of persons who spew fallacious and vindictive claims in an attempt to humiliate and gather coppers of hard-working individuals. How can we allow this, Madam Speaker, when a case study entitled The Impact of Being Wrongly Accused, Victims' Voices by Carolyn Hoyle. Quote, interviewees reported ruined careers, damage to their families, and experience of mental trauma outlasting their sometimes brief encounters with the criminal justice system, end quote. By going through this study, you can read the gruesome details of what can happen in these false complaints. The whispers, the gossip, the untrust, and at a high extent, these wrong convictions can cause death. The difficulty for these people to retain or even obtain employment because of this. They are shunned, ousted from society, and it is easy for us to say, that won't happen, that can't happen. However, it is who in the kitchen feel the heat. To that, we, the opposition, believe that no price can be crafted to subdue the damage that will be caused by these career-ending claims. Which is why, Madam Speaker, we reiterate the need for psychological sessions to ensure the functionality of these victims in society. We, as a people, normalize sexual harassment, the catcalling, the inappropriate touching, especially the unsolicited, not safe for work images. Do not be fooled. Men are just as susceptible to sexual harassment, but often categorize it as, I get it, a girl. They label harassment as something that should happen, and if it doesn't, you aren't a man. If a woman says no, it is labeled as hard to get and warrants the need to apply more pressure. To quote from this same bill, prevention is the best tool for the elimination of sexual harassment. So why is there no mention in Clause 17 of a process to educate the public, especially students, on exactly what sexual harassment is? The subject of family life is seen as a relic of the past, or if it is taught, it is not taken seriously. This is something that should be restored in the schools in an effort to highlight, for the purpose of this bill, what constitutes as sexual harassment, how persons can report harassment and protect themselves from victimization, among the other information on the intricacies of family life planning. Efficiently educating the youth on what is constituted as sexual harassment would greatly reduce the levels of teenage pregnancy, as it is completely obvious it doesn't go from hello to pregnant, but a gradual move through the murky waters of sexual harassment. The gut-wrenching fear, the inability to enjoy themselves while outside the confines of their deemed safe space. How can we sleep at night knowing this is the reality in which they face? Madam Speaker, as I come to a close, I can't help but to repeat the words of Dr. Lakeisha Hammond. Quote, sometimes sexual harassment registers as trauma, and it's difficult for the patient to deal with it. So what literally happens is the body starts to become overwhelmed, end quote. We cannot allow for the cries to go unanswered. We must not permit our people to suffer in silence, hoping and waiting for better days. It is with pleasure that in the passing of this bill, I can announce to these victims, better days are coming. Do not lose hope. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Darren Connor, Leader of the Opposition and Member for St. Christopher 1. 2.
Madam Speaker, today I rise to make my presentation in this Honorable House on the bill entitled the Sexual Harassment Bill 2020. Before looking at the substantive matters in this legislation, I believe that it is essential to put the sexual harassment debate into context. Despite the fact that sexual harassment has been around since time ancestral, 10 years ago, we would not have even thought about having a bill that speaks singly to the matter of sexual harassment. But what happened to change our mindset? According to the Harvard Business Review of May-June 2020, the term sexual harassment spread through academic circles in the United States in 1970s and began to gain traction as a legal concept in 1977 when the feminist legal scholar Catherine McKinnon put forward the argument that workplace harassment constitutes sex discrimination, which is illegal under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The watershed moment for the concept came in 1991 during the U.S. Supreme Court nomination hearings for Clarence Thomas, when Anita Hill accused Thomas of having sexually harassed her while she was his assistant. The televised testimony rocketed sexual harassment into public awareness and prompted many women to come forward with their own stories. At that time, we in the Caribbean were still wondering what the big deal was. Fast forward to more recent times,
and we have the Me Too movement, adding fuel to what was smoldering embers, and sexual harassment is once again at the forefront of our discussions. Madam Speaker, as we speak, 40% of women still report being sexually harassed, and 16% of men have a similar claim, and these are just those who report it. Madam Speaker, even the leader of opposition, my Prime Minister here, and the Minister for Gender Affairs said that men are sexually harassed. Yes, they are. But you and I know, if a man go across to the police station and report that he is sexually harassed, what the comments will be. Sexual harassment is unwelcome sexual behavior that's offensive and humiliating or intimidating. It can be written, verbal, or physical, and can happen in person or online. Actions that constitute sexual harassment include touching, grabbing, or making other physical contact without consent, making comments that have a sexual meaning, asking for sex or sexual favors, leering and staring, displaying rude and offensive material for others to see, making sexual gestures or suggestive body movements towards someone, cracking sexual jokes and comments, and questioning a person about their sex life. These actions are often perpetrated by men and is widespread not only in St. Kitts and Nevis, but in the region. Many men in the Caribbean fail to recognize the importance of this problem. Indeed, many do not view it as a problem at all, Madam Speaker. They see no harm in engaging in sexual banter in the workplace or anywhere else for that matter, or creating an uncomfortable environment for persons. It is reasonable to argue that in our corner of the world, sexual harassment represents behavior which is largely normalized. As a woman, I have been subjected to the seeping on the street, the patting on my behind, and even the casual brushing on my dress in a crowded space. Oftentimes, when myself and women like me take offense to the gestures, we are often greeted with a, "Oh, my bad," or "What is the big deal?" We even keep quiet at times because we believe we will not be taken seriously, or worse yet, we are ridiculed for saying anything at all. Madam Speaker, the patriarchal culture of the region nurtures this type of behavior, and unless we take concrete steps, this issue will not improve. Businesses and institutions have put policies and procedures in place to address sexual harassment, but this clearly is not enough. But I will leave that for the Minister of Labor here to further expound on. When we examine our existing legislation, sexual harassment is given maybe 1 or 2 clauses the most. In fact, in our Public Service Act of 2017, it is given only passing mention. Madam Speaker, we are here today to pass a piece of legislation that will mandate punctuative measures against persons found guilty of sexual harassment. This is long overdue, Madam Speaker. The former government exercised a reluctance to debate and enact laws to criminalize sexual harassment, and this has affected the quality of life for many in St. Kitts and Nevis. This forward-thinking government on this side, let us forget what those over there are saying. This forward-thinking government recognizes the importance of moving forward with this piece of legislation. As the opposition said, we are about talk. We are not just about talk, Madam Speaker. We are about action, action that can benefit the people of this country. Madam Speaker, in enacting this bill, we must put the requisite legal work in place so that persons who report sexual harassment are not victimized. Clause 18 of the bill speaks to victimization as a result of complaint. It clearly states that a person shall not victimize another person by subjecting or threatening to subject another person to any detriment. Under this bill, it makes it okay for persons to come forward without fear or recrimination. This bill is ambiguous and offers protection for persons who in good faith have a need to report sexual harassment. So, Madam Speaker, when persons who feel they have some sort of authority to bribe, intimidate, or threaten victims and witnesses, it is no longer a slap on the wrist or a half-hearted reprimand. Now, any person who contravenes Clause 18 is liable upon summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $5,000 or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 1 year or both. The legislation just doesn't stop there, Madam Speaker. Clause 20 to 30 of the legislation provides for complaints to the court and the procedure to be followed when such complaints are made. The respective clauses clearly set out the procedures for reporting a complaint, emphasize documentation relating to the complaint, and underscores the importance of a thorough investigation into the matter to make sure that people are not subjected to malicious claims. It further stipulates punishment or disciplinary procedures for those found guilty of sexual harassment as well as for those who falsely accuse people of sexually harassing them. Madam Speaker, this government is serious about protecting all citizens from sexual harassment. We are not just talking about it, but we are taking steps to achieve this objective. Madam Speaker, it is unfortunate that we as a Christian society have to legislate decent behavior, but we must seek to protect all persons from unwanted sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and crude sexual behaviors that affect quality of life by creating and intimidating hostile or offensive environment. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Eustacia Morton, Attorney General, Minister of Justice, Legal Affairs, Agriculture, Environment, Fisheries, Marine Resources, Cooperatives, and Lands, and Leader of Government Business.
Madam Speaker, with your permission, I rise today to contribute to the debate on the bill so entitled the Sexual Harassment Bill 2020. Recognizing the importance of a bill such as this, I dare not lend my voice to the debate merely as an opposition member. I am too painfully aware of the need to enact laws which will protect the most vulnerable among us, children. And today I will make my case using the angle of a child. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I will not simply oppose the bill as presented. In fact, in commencing my debate on the substantive legislative implications as it regards human rights of the accused and the accuser, I want to make a very clear declaration. The rights of the child to be protected against sexual harassment and protected from predators are indisputable and incontestable. I therefore boldly support any declaration that provides support and safety for children, especially as it relates to preventing secondary trauma when providing testimony on sexual harassment cases. I base my declaration on positions taken by internationally recognized and respected institutions, namely the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. In completing my research on the fundamental rights of the child, I was very pleased to review nearly 42 specific approaches to how children should be protected. Madam Speaker, it is crucial that at this moment I identify 3 specific parts of this convention which supports my position. Number 19, protection from violence. Governments must protect children from violence and be neglected from anyone who looks after them. Number 34, protection from sexual abuse. The government should protect children from sexual exploitation and sexual abuse, including by people forcing children to have sex for money or making sexual pictures or films of them. Number 36, protection from exploitation. Children have the right to be protected from all other kinds of abuse. If one follows the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child, then the bill being presented before this Honorable House can only be supported for its intent, but not in its entirety, without provisions being made for clarification in some key cases. Madam Speaker, I speak specifically to the relevant clauses of the bill which deals with inquiry to be held in camera, and an inquiry under this act shall be held in camera. This position taken by the proposed bill can be referenced by the CARICOM model, Sexual Harassment Bill, which explains that under Clause 17 of the model bill, an inquiry shall be held in public unless the tribunal determines otherwise. Under Section 17, the Belize Act, an inquiry shall be held in camera unless the court directs otherwise. The rationale for a public hearing of a dispute between the parties is not clear, especially if the matter is before a tribunal and does not constitute a criminal offense. It is suggested that proceedings be held in camera to encourage persons to air their grievances in the workplace, in educational institutions, or in seeking accommodation without being subjected to further public scrutiny. As far as practicable, proceedings relating to sexual harassment should be in camera or private. A provision similar to Section 17 of the Belize Act is recommended for inclusion in the draft bill. This should lessen the level of intimidation a complainant may experience, in particular where the accused is a supervisor. It has been noted that the pervasive sexual harassment in areas where a lot of women work with men, example, in factories, is not simply about sex but about power and control. Perhaps this is why sexual harassment has been classified to include violence against women and children. Madam Speaker, it is important that I make clear the following as I look at this piece of legislation. The fundamental right that the accused is to be able to face the accuser. Simply put, Madam Speaker, if you accuse me, I must be allowed to face you. If this fundamental right is denied the accused, then it is possible that serious miscarriages of justice may occur, since it is the court and jurors who are judges of fact. They should be able to judge if a witness is a witness of truth, based on attitude and body language, which becomes complex and constrained via a video link. And making such a determination will be very difficult. This bill before us must take this into account, so that the rights of one party are not infringed, especially if courts are to maintain a presumption of innocence until proven otherwise. Further, Madam Speaker, in St. Kitts and Nevis's context, like many other countries, we suffer from severe technological issues that may pose a further impediment to justice by enabling the inquiry via videotape. Madam Speaker, we have all had that experience where technology fails us at the most critical times. Madam Speaker, the opposition is aware that the focus of the relevant sections of the bill is to afford some allowances to give victims needed protection. However, while this is well-meaning, we assert that this is being prejudicial to the accused, as he or she has the right to face an accuser. A hearing via videotape impacts on a fair hearing. The victim should be properly assessed and should be in court. The safeguards for justice can be compromised with the victims or accusers being away from court, among other things. This bill does not make provision for protecting those safeguards. Madam Speaker, we know we live in a society where our moral compass can be described as skewed at best. We no longer hold many things sacred. So in this society where persons can be influenced to sell their vote to the highest bidder, or where criminals are being paid to keep the peace, it is not a stretch to think that testimonies can be bought and paid for, especially outside the confines of the hallowed halls of justice. So, Madam Speaker, when the Attorney General is speaking to the legal framework, I hope she is mindful of these realities. We acknowledge as the opposition the rights of the child are fundamental, and being born to this world, a child must be protected by governing laws. Madam Speaker, we acknowledge that facing the person who hurt you a second time is inconceivable. No one will wish this repeated trauma on anyone. However, with the opposition, while supporting the need to protect the health and safety of children against sexual harassment, We believe that it's important to recognize and accept that the accused has a right to face his or her accuser. The government speaks to using videotape recordings as a means of protecting minors in sexual harassment cases. Madam Speaker, but it must go further than that. There are other protections which must be enacted and pursued vigorously. These include total protection. Protection from repeated trauma is not something that should happen, not something that should be pursued only during testimonials. There is a serious need to protect children altogether from sexual harassment. Protection during the entirety of a case. Additionally, social services and legal system must be commissioned to protect victims not just when testimonies are required, but also throughout the entire legal process. Victims must go through rigorous debriefing and legal procedures for their justice. Throughout this process, they must be protected. Additionally, the state has a crucial role to play in ensuring the victims are safe from families of the accuser and the possible onslaught of social media back and forth, which can further traumatize victims, especially minors. Madam Speaker, we support any bill which speaks out against sexual harassment. As a child, I am completely for the protection of children from sexual assault and exploitation. I understand the trauma that comes within facing someone who harass and abuse you and may have threatened your life if you dare speak out. However, we said this bill must delve further, and as a responsible opposition, we were compelled to table the rights as relates to the accused facing the accuser. Once again, Madam Speaker, I repeat that while we can support the intent of the legislation before us, we cannot support it in its entirety, unless there is further clarity on some key provisions. Madam Speaker, may it please you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Renaya Francis, Opposition Senator.
Madam Speaker, today I rise to make a brief contribution on the bill before this Honorable House. Madam Speaker, it is timely that we, the government, introduce the Sexual Harassment Bill 2020. As the Minister of Labour, I stand before you elated to expound upon portions of the bill that specifically relates to sexual harassment within the workplace. The opposition may ask, why now? But Madam Speaker, the real question is, why not now? The Ministry of Labour strongly believes and is confident that the bill provides criminal penalties, but primarily focuses on sexual harassment and explicitly provides protection in the workplace. Sexual harassment is persistent, unwanted sexual advances such as verbal conduct, which includes comments on workers' appearance, sexual jokes, sex-based insults. Physical conduct, which includes unwelcome physical contact, the use of job-related threats, physical violence, and sexual assault. Nonverbal, which includes leering and sexually suggestive gestures. Madam Speaker, unfortunately, many cases of such acts are often unreported by victims. Many persons avoid reporting the harassment because they do not want to be viewed as a victim, an attention seeker, or simply do not want to deal with negative consequences that may come from filing a report. In a survey conducted among Jamaican workers, 33% of respondents stated that they were subjected to sexual harassment. However, only 13% chose to report. With the introduction of this legislation, the bill expressly prohibits any form of unlawful employee harassment. Madam Speaker, a constituent crane hysterically said to me, and I quote, "Minister, imagine my supervisor touch my breast, and when I complained to the boss man, he ain't do a thing." Madam Speaker, with the successful passage of this bill, employees will no longer be without an avenue or relief when they are subjected to unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and all of the verbal physical conduct of a sexual or otherwise offensive nature. Also, the bill serves as a deterrent to anybody, whether an employer or employee, from sexually harassing fellow workers, especially where submission to such conduct is expected upon acceptance or continuation of employment. Madam Speaker, this conduct explicitly and implicitly affects an individual's employment and unreasonably interferes with an individual's workplace performance, thereby creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. In reference, Clause 13 of this bill prohibits an employer and employee, a commission agent, a partner in a partnership from committing an act of sexual harassment. Madam Speaker, we must protect our vulnerable people within workplaces, where they will no longer have any fears when reporting incidences of sexual harassment. Fears that include losing advancement opportunities such as promotions, to be labeled as mischief maker, and to be at risk of retaliation by the workplace. Being free from sexual harassment is a basic human right, and Madam Speaker, we all have the right to live and work free from sexual harassment. And as an employer, you have a responsibility to maintain a sexual-free workplace that is safe for employees. Madam Speaker, the bill stipulates that it is the responsibility of employers and managers to ensure that a clear policy is in place, the main key to preventing sexual harassment within the workplace. Madam Speaker, the workplace must have statements on the organization's attitude against sexual harassment, organization's objectives regarding sexual harassment, clear definition of sex harassment, and clear definition of what is not sexual harassment, examples of sexual harassment, and a statement that sexual harassment is against the law. Madam Speaker, we are creating a cultural change in our places of employment. Employers and management must inform employees of the workplace's policy which relates to sexual harassment. They shall also inform all employees within the workplace that sexual harassment will not be tolerated, it will be investigated, and it will be punished. Along with the implementation of sexual harassment policies, the bill also requires workplaces to have anti-harassment training for all employees, as one of the ways to protect employees from sexual harassment. Effective sexual harassment training helps to protect its workers and creates a safe working environment. In an effort to ensure that employers adequately and efficiently train its workers, all workplaces must ensure that all employees know what sexual harassment is, know what to do if they experience sexual harassment directly or if they witness sexual harassment as a bystander. All victim of workplace sexual harassment has the option to lodge complaints according to the workplace's sexual harassment procedure, which state that a formal report should be drafted and submitted to internal bodies such as the human resource officer or manager, and internal bodies such as the police. With reference to Clause 14 of this bill, which requires an employer to take appropriate action on becoming reasonably suspicious on fault of an act of sexual harassment, managers and employers have a responsibility to act promptly and affirmatively when they observe behavior that violates this policy or when they receive complaints of sexual harassment. These complaints should be reported to the police as an investigating officer will be attached. Madam Speaker, the employer cannot decide whether to believe the employee, but must take the fellow employee at their word and investigate sexual harassment claims thoroughly without delay. Madam Speaker, potential sexual harassment claims should also be investigated as if they were formal complaints. This includes hearsay from other employees and when an employee informs the employer about questionable behavior they have witnessed. An employer may impose penalties such as warnings and suspension or termination. Madam Speaker, an employer will be held liable for an act of sexual harassment committed by an employee within the workplace if it is proven that the employer failed to take action against sexual harassment or failed to take reasonable steps to prevent such continuation of the conduct. An employer may face penalties such as compensatory damages, which Clause 25 of this bill states as a fine not exceeding $50,000. Madam Speaker, for example, In 2004, a woman working as a security guard in South Africa won a significant case of sexual harassment. It was the first time an employer was held liable for sexual harassment by one of his employees. The company was ordered to pay the victim compensation for unfair dismissal and sexual harassment. The citizens of this federation has placed their trust in my government. And as the Minister responsible for Labor, Madam Speaker, I assure not only you, but every worker in the private and public sector within the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis a safe and improved working environment. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Senator Warner, Minister of Labor, Transport, Ports, Public Infrastructure, Utilities, Posts, and Urban Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, Madam Speaker, cautious timekeeper, members of the government, fellow members of the opposition, and members of the floor. I rise to make a brief contribution on the sexual harassment bill before this honorable House. Madam Speaker, before I proceed, please permit me to define the term sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is defined as an unwanted or unwelcome sexual attention of an offensive nature made by a person who knows or reasonably should know that the attention is unwanted or unwelcomed, and the person to whom it is made may conclude that the conduct is one of purpose or intent to humiliate, offend, intimidate, etc. Sexual harassment is the most common type of workplace harassment. Recent Caribbean statistics show that more than half of all workers have experienced some form of sexual harassment in the workplace. Because of its prevalence and damaging effects to an organization's productivity, morale, and culture, employers must try and actively prevent and eliminate sexual harassment in their organization. In the bill, Madam Speaker, nothing has been addressed based on the LGBTQ community. And we know that anyone and everyone can be victims of sexual harassment. Not a lot is known about sexual harassment in the workplace about the LGBTQ. So when looking at these individuals, we must ask the question, how do we protect them? Madam Speaker, it is not surprising that the third sex is not addressed in this matter. Madam Speaker, this is one of the major shortcomings of the bill. The bill should address the LGBTQ community and how they are going to report sexual harassment in the workplace and find out about their experiences. Madam Speaker, it is complicated by the fact that the LGBT workplace intervention to basically their homophobic attitude towards the LGBTQ community is about harassment and bullying. And so I find that in terms of Me Too movement, sexual harassment in the workplace gains a high profile of basically the men and women. But what about the LGBTQ community? What about these individuals? People in society tend not to pay attention because they feel it's their lifestyle and something that they like. Madam Speaker, it is imperative that we start addressing issues related to the LGBTQ community.
Another issue which complicates this matter is that there are lots of barriers. These people live in the closet and therefore they do not want to come out, and as a result they keep it secret. So I find that for the LGBTQ community, these will include the normalization of sexual harassment behavior in the workplace and in the wider society where people normalize it, which lead to these people being reluctant to talk about sexual harassment. Across the wider Caribbean region, no one has addressed these issues in terms of their legislations. So, Madam Speaker, it is time for us as a community to address these issues. And if we address these issues, we are going to be inclusive rather than exclusive. We live in the 21st century, Madam Speaker, and we need to recognize the importance for us as a community to embrace legislations that are progressive and productive, and don't wait for something to happen to go back to the drawing board. Conclusively, many of these individuals had unwelcome verbal and sexual advances in the workplace towards them, where many persons have come across and said, "Oh, why are you so gay? Why you are a lesbian? You need some straightening out? You need some sex." So these comments are made to LGBT members. So these will make them feel uncomfortable and won't want them to come out of their closet, basically, in quote unquote. Where they are put in situations that are uncomfortable in terms of relationship. As you speak about relationship, when someone in your workplace finds out that you are part of such groupings, they will tend to want to have a relationship which they know that they don't want to have. And so many of them are turned off about it. And questions are asked, who is the top, who is the bottom? And so we know in society, people don't like to be asked who is the top and who is the bottom. In terms of males, the gay men, these questions are they're asked to these people. Madam Speaker, as I move on, another point I would like to touch on is the sex registry for persons who engage in sexual harassment. Is there a registry for these individuals? I stress once more that sexual harassment is a serious issue, and if there is nothing to place to prevent these happenings, we cannot protect these individuals from these predators. Some people may see it as something harsh, but Madam Speaker, when we talk about sexual offenses and sexual harassment in the workplace, we need to send a strong message to those who engage in inappropriate behavior and sexual contact. People will say it is not right. It's not the right punishment, but it is more about deterring these people. The registry will be designed to protect these persons who are sexual predators who repeatedly prey on others, and so the registry is more for prevention, that people go to work and not be harassed. A sexual predator is not always someone who preys on just children. We see a sexual predator as someone who engages in harassment. A lot of people are unwilling to control their sexual urges, and so the government and the workplace cannot do enough to protect these people. So mechanisms need to be put in place to prevent individuals from reaching to the point where he or she needs to attack more persons. So I want to say that the law needs to look and put in place preventative measures to avoid sexual exploitation for those in society who are less fortunate. The offenders who would be placed in tiers would be charged for different offenses. So where there is the highest stage, which is stage 3, these persons will be put in prison to prevent other persons from experiencing harassment. So, and the community in general will have to know about the registry and who are on the list. Because if they do not know, then these people will be out there still prowling and more persons will be attacked. So when the communities know about these, the registry put in place, then they will feel comfortable and due diligence will be done to these people. So, Madam Speaker, to have an understanding that sexual harassment is not only about women, but it also happens to men in our society. Finally, I would like to draw another point that training for employers and employees need to be enforced in the workplace. If we look at clause 17, clause 17 says, and I state, will prohibit a person who or an employee of an educational authority which provides facilities for vocational training in order to assist another person to become fit for employment for subjecting that person to sexual harassment. It's not only about the employees being trained, it's about the employers also who needs to be trained, which begs the fact that it needs to start at the primary school level, where it comes up in the curriculum, it's given to the curriculum, so they will know about sexual harassment. And when they know about these things at a younger age, the education that they have will put them in the mindset that these things should not be done. And so employees and employers will know that they are protected by the laws once they enforce these training programs for these people. So sexual harassment won't be much of a problem, even though it's under the wall and it happens all the time, even in our present society. So it needs to be brought out to our people and let them know that it's not a good thing for them to be doing. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Theodore Smithon, Opposition Senator. I'll ask that the final presenter be mindful of time as we wrap up this morning's proceedings.
Madam Speaker, I rise to wind up the debate on this bill before this Honorable House. Madam Speaker, I wish to first commend the work
of their speeches, every point coming up to the sitting right now, there have been exceptionally well. I'd like to thank all of you, the viewers, those in the audience, and those viewing at home via live stream. Thank you for tuning in and for your endless support of this prestigious organization. And a special thanks to the ministers. We hope that you observe this sitting and are willing to pass these. Thank you one and all. God bless and happy Youth Month.
Madam Speaker, I beg to second the motion for the adjournment, and in doing so, allow me on the adjournment to say a few words on behalf of the Washington Archibald High School. At this time, we would like to relish the opportunity to recognize and commend all of the youth in the Federation. It is our distinct pleasure, especially, to congratulate the class of 2020 and their outstanding performances in the past CSEC examinations. Even amid a global pandemic, they were not only able to achieve a record number of registrations, but also subject passes. Even with stay-at-home orders, a sudden shift to online tuition, and a cancellation of traditional face-to-face classes, students, with the support of their parents and teachers, persevered. This Youth Month 2020, our thoughts and prayers are with those who have suffered the harsh impact of COVID-19 on their lives and that of their families. As we strive to do our personal best to strike a healthy balance and a new normal amidst the chaos, we implore the youth of the Federation to, even in this difficult time, continue striving for the excellence within them and their communities. May it please, Madam Speaker.
Before we have the formal adjournment, I'd like to take this opportunity to formally thank the civil organization, the Caribbean Institute for Women in Leadership, for the assistance they would have provided in the preparation of the speeches today, especially on the sexual harassment bill. We're grateful for you for the support that you provided our youth parliamentarians this morning. If there are no other statements, I will formally adjourn Parliament. The question is that this Honorable House stands adjourned, sign and I. All in favor? Aye. All against? The ayes have it.